afternoon.
Ananya, you will better present also yourself so that it's not a
I'm Ananya Bhattacharjee from India. Respected panel and brothers and sisters from Cambodia and the international community. I am the International Coordinator of Asia Floor Wage Alliance and also with Garment and Allied Workers Union in India, which is organizing garment workers in one of the largest garment production hubs in the world. Today, my testimony will focus on Asia Floor Wage and to explain what that whole process and thinking has been about. We come from the understanding and the knowledge that the garment industry is one of the oldest international industries in the world. And if one can really make change in garment for workers producing for the global market, then we will solve a lot of the basic problems that face the world's working poor today. Which is why garment is a focus for us, and Asia, what is its place in the global garment industry is what we look at. Asia is the largest recipient of foreign investment, and at the same time it holds the largest workforce and represents most of the global working poor. And women are an increasingly significant portion of this global working poor. Just to give you the figures of the globalization of the garment industry, before 1960 the United States used to import only 5% of the garments. Today the United States imports more than 90% of its garments from 70 different countries. The ILO calls the garment industry the true one-world employer. The largest concentration for garment production is in Asia. This is not a research that Asia Floor Wage had to do. It is a well-established fact by all stakeholders. The largest concentration for production is in Asia, but Asian workers have the lowest wage level. And in terms of how much Asia produces for the global market, let me also add that the scale at which it produces, along with other factors that make Asia an appropriate place, which is access to raw materials, technology, skills, wage levels, so on. These are a composition of factors that are not easy to duplicate in other continents of the world. So Asia is where the garment industry has come to rest for the most part in its production. So if we can put a floor below which the value of Asian labor should not be costed, a floor for the price of Asian labor, then we can actually stop what has become a global corporate race to the bottom. The garment industry has been hopping from country to country to look for the cheapest labor. It has come to rest in Asia because of all the various factors that allow it to produce in large volumes and cheaply from Asia. And if we can set a floor to the value of Asian labor, then we will set a floor to the global corporate race to the bottom. If you look at the cost of a shirt, and this is slightly old data, in a global supply chain, you will find that the red line shows that it is somewhere between 2.5 to 3.5% of the retail price. So in fact, it is a very, very small percentage that goes into the cost of labor. So why is labor squeezed so much when it is already squeezed? So why is it such a difficult area to raise the value of, and why does it keep on getting squeezed? Now, at this point, why do we raise the issue of Asia floor wage? The garment industry is an old industry. Why now do we raise these questions? If you look at the last 2 decades, we are moving into a highly dangerous world where workers are getting poorer, which means that even when we boast about global economies growing at an average of 3.3% per year, the wage growth is only 1.2%, which means that economies can grow a lot and yet workers themselves get a very small share of that increasing revenue. According to the ILO, proportion of people on low pay has increased in more than 2/3 of the countries. There are 555 million working poor, a significant percentage being women. Workers are getting poorer. This doesn't mean everybody is getting poorer. What is very clear is that there is a growing gap between the rich and the poor, a growing inequality. So for example, before the CEO of General Motors compared to the average worker, the differences in their income used to be 1:70. Today, the CEO of Walmart, when compared to the average worker, is 1:140. So we are living in a more unequal world. The third is that workers' ability to collectively organize and bargain for better conditions has deteriorated hugely, and the ILO has shown that more than half the world's workers work in what can be called vulnerable employment, where vulnerable means not only poor wages, it also means that you can be fired any day, you can be physically threatened, you can become vulnerable as a worker in many different ways. So this is the context in which we are proposing Asia floor wage. When workers are poorer, owners of capital and industry are getting richer, and workers' strength to collectively organize and bargain is getting less. We are often told, though, that why are you talking about raising wages? This is a bad time because there is an economic downturn. Consumers will stop buying and there will be a drop in sales. Business is down, we are all losing, profits are down, etc., etc., factories will close, so on. These are the arguments given. Let me give you some counter arguments. In Newsweek in 2009, financial analyst Richard Duncan argued that the global economy's well-being rests heavily on Asia's ability to consume more than it manufactures. In fact, at that time, he advocated for $5 minimum wage for Asia. And this is in Newsweek, which is a very mainstream international magazine. But if you look at it, the purchasing power of the vast majority is falling in Asia. Workers are getting poorer. So in fact, to make Asia's worker poorer is bad for the global economy. This is what not a trade unionist or an NGO activist, but this is a financial analyst in Newsweek is warning us. In fact, Asia Floorweight sets a floor that helps bring the bottom up. So it's simply a bottom that is collapsing, and Asia Floorweight is putting a floor to the bottom so that we stop this growing inequalities and move towards stability. The other argument that sales will drop, customers will stop buying, we find that to be an unfounded fear. Scholars have studied, and these are well-established scholars in the top universities in developed countries. In fact, scholars have studied that when wage increases, the ultimate cost is so minimal that business doesn't even care to adjust. Scholars show that wage increase will affect less than 1% the sales revenue by various Asian countries. In short, sales are not dropping, have no indication of dropping, and labor cost has minimal impact on sales revenue to the extent that business doesn't even bother to adjust to it. In fact, this graph from 1929 to 2010 shows that clothing expenditures as a share of US disposable income, in the sense that the income that we have to spend on goods of choice, the clothing part of that has dropped in 2010 to almost 3%, which means that if we have $100 to spend on goods of choice, we are spending only $3 on garments. Not that we are buying less, but that we are able to get the same value, we are able to spend the same amount of money and get the same amount of garments that we got previously. So garment prices, retail prices are going down. Same in UK. And this is another table just to show that wage increase has minimal effect on retail price. The price in the showrooms, the price in the malls and the shops. One of the brands who has been invited to this tribunal, their financials from 2010 first half, I wanted to share with you. And you will see that all indications are that they have surpassed the profits of previous years. So we are losing, we don't have profits, and we can't give wages is simply again a false statement. It was shown yesterday and I show that again today. So I just want to remind all of you that basically these issues of, sales will drop, we don't have enough profits and so on and so forth, that these are mixed to some extent, and they are not relevant to the issue of determining labor cost for living wage and paying it. For brands who want to pay living wage, they have cited other issues that have stopped them in the past. There is no definition, some would say. How can we pay something that we don't know what it is? It's an idea. So the AFW formula answers that. Another point raised has been that consumer activists in the global north are campaigning on living wage, but we haven't really heard any organized Asian voices really putting this demand out in a way that is actionable. So now we have the Asian-led Asia Floor Wage Alliance. The third hurdle that has been cited is the threat of relocation. That if we raise the wage in one country, then it will move to another Asian country, and how can that's not a good thing. You'll be punishing the country that raises its wage. So the Asia Floor Wage is a regional formula for all Asian workers. And what it does not do is make any country less competitive than another country. The countries may be competitive on other issues. Some countries have better roads than other countries. Some countries have more raw materials than other countries. So there may be other reasons why countries are competitive. But what Asia Floor Wage maintains is that paying Asia Floor Wage in and of itself does not disturb the competitive ranking of the countries. So now I'll get to what is Asia Floor Wage and how did we get to it. We wanted Asia Floor Wage to be a very simple formula which most people can understand. It should not be difficult in terms of trade unionists, practitioners, workers not being able to understand it and negotiate it.
And at the same time, it has to be a formula that captures the Asian experience in a broad way, which means that the formula is a strong formula that can be applied regionally, but every country can adjust it further based on their local context, how much the trade unions in their own countries are able to bargain, and so on and so forth. And, but this Asia Floor Wage is the minimum living wage. We do not say it is the living wage, it is the minimum living wage. And it is the lowest living wage that a worker should get in Asia for producing garments. So we break it up into two simple components. There is enough research done on wage for decades for this to be discussed here, but typically wages can be broken down into food cost and non-food cost. These are historical ways of defining wages. So wage is equal to NFC, non-food cost, plus FC, food cost. Why do we take food cost? We take food cost because in poorer countries such as Asian countries, workers spend the most amount of money on food. Food and healthcare. Most of the garment workers I work with, food and healthcare are the two main expenditures. So which is why food is an important item. Now food, we know that all of us eat different types of food. So if we got into really defining what should go into a food basket, it can take a very long time. So what we did, what is again done usually, it's a scientific practice and a historical one where we define the food in caloric value. It's the caloric value of the food basket rather than the content, actual content. And these calorie, what is the calorie we should decide on we came to that conclusion based on calorie descriptions in government figures and in international respected research figures. So I won't go very deeply into this, but I have cited the Indian, the Chinese, the Indonesian, the FAO, the SCAP, various bodies. And what we decided in AFW is that whatever caloric figure we take on should be the most recently defined, and it should not lower the aspirations of any national government, because governments should be knowing about these things. So the Indonesian government, which had the most recent definition of 3,000 calories, was the standard adopted by Asia Floorwage. So if an adult who is working is consuming 3,000 calories per day, then how much of the wage will go into buying the food for 3,000 calories per day? So we looked again at official statistics in different countries, and there are these statistics. So how much of a worker's income goes into food typically? We looked at, for example, 4 countries, and given the figures you see on the right-hand side, 47.5, 67, 44, 62, we came to an average of 50%. That a 50% of a worker's income goes into the caloric figure we were suggesting. Other than food, the very essential part of life is the non-food part, which is where we get our homes, clothing, health care, maternity care, child care, education, fuel, transportation, savings, all those things that make us human, that make us have a quality life. So, however, there is no universal agreement on all the items that should go into non-food. So again, we were looking for a formula to give a broad indication. So we decided, well, let us look at how much workers spend on non-food items. And what we found, again from official figures from these 4 countries, is that it varies, but one could come to a broad average that if food cost is about 50% of the wages, then non-food cost is about the other 50%. So this is the final AFW formula of food cost at 3,000 calories food basket per adult per day, and non-food cost and food cost will take equal parts of the wage. And so Asia floor wage is NFC plus FC, but since both are the same, it's twice the food cost. The next issue was, well, do we decide Asia floor wage as per one worker or a family? And usually, even though in minimum wage there is variation, some countries like in India, only the worker is taken into consideration, family is taken into consideration, and in Indonesia, the worker living wage definitions typically include the family. So we decided to go with the family, And then we had to decide the size of the family. How big can the family be? So we looked at the family sizes, again official statistics from Asian governments, to look at the family sizes across Asian countries. And we came to basically something like 3 consumption units, if I can put it that way, where each consumption unit refers to an adult, and a child is half a consumption unit. So basically the AFW is based on 3 consumption units, which can be a family of 2 adults and 2 children, or 1 adult and 4 children, or 3 adults, any of these combinations. But because we want to take into consideration childcare costs, because this is an industry dominated by women workers, we wanted to keep it at a 1 earner family only. So not double income, 1 income that can support the whole family. So I won't go into this very much. This kind of just tells you the ways in which one calculates AFW in a particular country using the formula I have just described. Another question that is asked of us is, why don't we take into consideration things like employers producing dormitory housing, giving workers dormitory housing or canteen lunch and so on? Shouldn't employers who give those things pay less? Our answer is that delivery of these benefits is not the norm, it's the exception. And so we do not want to take that into consideration. Secondly, even if the employer provides dormitory or canteen lunch, the worker should still have the option of living with family on their own. In other words, we want the worker to earn the minimum living wage without being at the mercy of anybody else. That basic minimum living wage should be earned as earned income for the work done. The working hours, this does not include overtime. It is to be earned within less than or equal to 48 hours a week, which is the highest hourly law that exists in Asia. So AFW's definition of a work week and its independence from benefits sends a clear message that workers need to earn a minimum living wage without sacrificing other humane working conditions. This again shows you the AFW in local currency in 2009 in different countries. However, when we calculate the AFW in local currencies in different countries, how do we compare it? I mean, somebody is earning in rupiah, somebody is earning in rial, somebody is earning in takas. So we need something with which we can tell each other, okay, this is what we are all earning. So we thought about the exchange rate, which fluctuates a lot and therefore very difficult to use. And we use what is the purchasing power parity. It's an imaginary currency of the World Bank. And basically PPP is updated every so often, every few years. And it calculates how much money is needed by a person outside the United States to buy the same basket of goods that a person in the USA can buy. So it's based on a basket of things that we think that an individual should be having. So purchasing power parity. According to that, the AFW in 2009 was set at 475 PPP dollar. Here it shows you how the PPP has changed from 2005 to 2009. In 2009, when we did the AFW, we used a 2005 figure, but the more updated one uses 2009. This is AFW in 2011, last year. And so the last two columns, so the AFW 2009 was 475 ppp. It was upgraded to 540 ppp in 2011 based on consumer price index changes. And then the last column gives you the conversion into local currencies. So for example, in India, where the minimum wage right now in the area where I'm organizing is 5,000, the AFW is about 10,000. That means the current minimum wage in India where I'm organizing is about half the Asia floor wage. If you look at Cambodia, then I think it comes to, I have it here, comes to about, Cambodia's minimum wage right now, without the $5 increase mentioned earlier, is about 22% of the AFW. So the Cambodia is very, very low now compared to some of the other countries. Okay, so now that I have explained to you the context why we started Asia Floor Wage, and then I went on to explain to you what the formula and the process for deciding Asia Floor Wage has been. I will now move to who we think is responsible for paying Asia Floor Wage. Asia Floor Wage was put in the public domain in 2009, although the process for building it took about 3 years among all of us. So from 2009 to 2011, we have had time to hear from others, get input, and also develop positions. So I want to go over some of that. We believe that the responsibility for paying Asia Floor Wage is up to the brands and the retailers. Their financial power is built through this global supply chain, and the reason they are able to build up this power is because they have access to the high-price consumer countries at one end and the low-cost labor in the production countries. So they have access to two different worlds. One world where the consumer prices are high, and in another world where the labor cost is extremely low. And they serve as a broker between these two worlds. And our suppliers, Asian suppliers, are only in one world. They are mainly in the low labor cost world. They are not able to directly sell their products in the high consumer price world. So the buyers are middlemen, you can say, who use their ability to access both these worlds exclusively to build the profits, and the suppliers of the producing countries are only in one world. So there is a power difference, as you can see. Brands and retailers have been called by Gary Gareffi, who is a well-known global supply chain scholar, manufacturers without factories. That means they do the design and the marketing, but the physical production of goods is completely separate. Brands have huge advertising budgets just to market their brand. Just to market that logo, that brand, a lot of budget goes into advertising. Brands have also used very sophisticated technology to pass on the risks to suppliers. If price of some production input increases, or some calamity happens somewhere, the suppliers are left to deal with it, whereas the brands are only in the business of giving the order and seeing that it is delivered. at their end that it arrives. Brands and retailers can share a very negligible fraction of their profit in order to pay Asia floor wage. Manufacturers in Asia have repeatedly told us, and research also shows this, that the prices that the brands pay to the Asian manufacturers for the products that they receive have decreased. And therefore the profit margins of Asian manufacturers have decreased. And this depresses further the wages that production workers get. So the brands want the consumers, and we know that consumers in the global north, their incomes have been falling because of the economic downturn. They want the consumers to buy the garments, and the garment prices are kept artificially low by keeping the labor cost low. This shows you that the prices that the brands are paying the manufacturers have been going down, which squeezes the manufacturers' margins. So we believe that Asia floor wage is easily deliverable by brands if they increase the price to the manufacturers, which is already artificially low, that it should be increased to take into account living wage and Asia floor wage. But how do we say how much they should increase, and what does labor need in order to pay Asia floor wage? What is the amount? Doug Miller, who is a well-known scholar at the University of Northumbria and also was with the Global Union Federation, ITGLWF, he has produced a is an excellent report, the first of its kind, where he has shown how bad things are and what needs to happen. He has shown that retailers and brands do not do any systematic costing of labor when they decide the price that they should pay the manufacturers. So in fact, when you hear any brand, yesterday and today we have heard other brands being quoted as saying, we believe that we are paying living wage or whatever, then please know that it is not a well-evidenced statement, because they have not done the costing, so they cannot say it. And because the costing of labor has not been done for the pricing, this, Miller concludes, is the reason for the chronic persistence of factory non-compliance on wages and overtime. He says it's possible, very possible, to calculate the labor minute value, as it would be called, which is the cost of labor for any garment. It used to be done as part of general sewing data in the UK when more garment used to get produced in the global north. So the global north, in fact, has a system of doing it. But guess what? It is not used for Asian workers. So Miller says that it's possible to determine this labor cost and do a ring fence around it, saying don't touch this labor cost, touch anything else you want, but whatever price you give, it must include this labor cost. GMAC was not able to come yesterday, I believe, but Ken Liu, General Secretary of GMAC, I would like to quote him. He said in 2009, the buyers nowadays come to us with the specifications of the garments they want produced. What generally happens is that the factories are given a price as a lump sum value, and the factories are left to manage it as they like. In this case, there is some haggling and negotiations about providing a longer standard time in order to get a higher price. In most cases, however, there is just a negotiation to obtain a higher price without much reference to the standard times. We are left to manage our own costs, and the buyers generally adopt a take it or leave it attitude when it comes to the price they provide to us. So this is GMAC sort of saying that the dilemma that they face as manufacturers. The general sewing data that does these studies have started reporting that manufacturers are looking at this GSD data, which is old historical data, to see what they can, how it affects labor costing. It is outdated data, but they say no brands and retailers ever go to them. So Miller recommends that there be a central database where standard minute values or labor minute values are calculated for new styles and added to the database, and that this be used to then do labor costing for prices. I think I don't have much time, yeah? So basically this is just repeating the fact that once the labor cost is fixed, one can ring fence it and force brands and suppliers to address the issue of how the factory is operating, since the basic minimum wage would be the same regardless of factory efficiency. This would require transparency, and the reason I'm saying this is because I think this is an issue for people who are trying to make the global supply chain work better. It is one of the issues raised by Better Factories Cambodia as well. So any kind of pricing negotiation based on labor cost will require some amount of mutual transparency from buyers and suppliers. I'll briefly cover some of the responses that brands have given to Asia floor wage. One statement is AFW is based largely on ideologically motivated assumptions rather than facts. I think what I have showed you is that AFW is very much based on ground level data and facts. It is ideologically motivated to the extent that we represent workers and brands represent their shareholders. So we are all ideologically motivated. It's a matter of who represents whom. Some have claimed the model is too simplistic. But I think those are some older statements before brands got to appreciate AFW, which has now become a very credible benchmark globally. Some of the more recent comments is that AFW makes a useful contribution to the debate. It is a model for living wages. And some of the multi-stakeholder initiatives and brands have started taking AFW as a benchmark to see how much their wages differ from AFW. However, at the end, they say, we do not feel able to endorse the Asia floor wage as it's not possible to implement it. Increasing price is not something we are prepared to consider in order to implement a living wage. It would damage our competitiveness. Increasing labor costs should come from increasing efficiency, not increasing prices. So on and so forth. So a lot of what we think are not really believable reasons for not giving Asia floor wage. It's definitely possible to implement it, and Asia Floor Wage Alliance has made many advances to brands to say, we will help you. Our local partners who are there in all producing countries will work with you to do something that is transparent and implementable. But we have had no takers so far. What can buyers do immediately? This is my last slide. Publicly endorse AFW as a viable benchmark for living wage. Adopt living wage as an integral part of sustainable production. Develop labor costing and pricing mechanism for making Asia floor wage deliverable. And work with workers' organizations to implement Asia floor wage with their suppliers. So thank you.
Thank you very much for this very comprehensive presentation. I think that we have now a well background for also quantitative definition or possible definition. As we have said yesterday, living wages are not quantities, but it's a process of definitions. And I think that we have here data, and since in this area what is important is to have real data from the real world, I think we have to thank for this presentation, which is a good background for many of the discussion. I am asking now whether there are some questions.
I follow, sorry, I always start in this.
I have followed your presentation with regards to the initiative of Asia floor wage in the aim to increase the wage, which influence on food costs and non-food costs, which is similar in the region. If you think about the determination of the consumption, you can determine that one person can consume how much, can need how much clothing and how much housing, for example, X. But the value, we cannot manage. The price, when the price we cannot manage, the labor cost in each country will vary. What can you do? What can we do to evade the competition between country and country? The aim of the Asia floor wage is to reduce the competition between country and country. And if you look at the actual situation, both the purchasing power, the exchange rate varies, the price will also varies in each country. So that's my question. Number two, on the determination of calorie. How can we determine calorie, how much? 3,000 calories all the way. In some days, some country 3,300, 3,500 calories. How can we stop that? This is a problem. Is there any scientific research that Asian people spend just how much this calorie they can become healthy? This is a question which I want to propose to you. Thank you very much.
Other questions, if you like, just so she could collect questions.
Thank you very much. Very much. A good program. I found it is a good program. The last slide I am interested in. What can we do, buyers do immediately? Can you tell me on the third point you raised, number one, publicly endorse AFW. Number three, what can we do to increase, develop a pricing mechanism so that we can use this AFW to be applicable? Is there any ideas behind this that you can explain to me further? Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. I have one question with regard to the contract between buyers and producers. Have you got any information with regards to the agreement between buyers and producers or manufacturers? Thank you very much.
May I make many times these calculations obviously are dependent on various models, but I think I would be good. I would insist in going back to one of your slides where you are setting the very ridiculous component of the salary cost in this production of prices, because that I think is the core of the issue, the 0 point, which is really something which is very much online about the dignity, in the sense that within the full supply chain, you have 0.6% or something, 2.3%, which is the place of human work in a good. Now, have you, and that is very important, because it seems as if we are simply asking just to modify a bit the only human component of goods, which should be the most flexible component. Then everybody is discussing about the other component. Have you also any idea of how is the component of the human cost in all or other good products, including, for instance, intellectual products? Because the comparative dignity of workers in the garment industry is not only compared between the cost of what is the income of a worker and the income of a manager, is the fact that what is the way these things are produced, because that give the idea of how human work is considered in the culture. And in this confrontation with, also big factories of buyers who are in fact so keen in keeping the difference among the salary, I think that should be put into evidence, because otherwise it seems as if when we are dealing with them, we are asking for a favor instead of asking for something which would be so obvious in that sense. And I think that just to show that things are obvious, I was referring back to the sentence quoted before by Professor Berger, and I'm back 907, saying, look, you can't judge a wage according to the profit. You have something to have humans. I wonder whether you have other examples of other area where this type of calculation have been made in order to strengthen also even more the reasonable request, more than reasonable request of a living wage as the flexible component of the cost of goods.
Okay. Well, let me see in which order. Regarding the determination of calories and how it varies from country to country. First of all, the figures that we have looked at, as I showed in the slide, are estimated calorie figures given from government statistics in Asian countries, as well as respected international institutions such as the Food and Agricultural Organization and so on. So the 3,000 is based on researched data, not research we have done, but in fact research that is much more credible, which is governments and international institutions. Now, whether it will vary from 3,000 to 3,500 in some countries, what we say in Asia floor wage is that we are setting the floor but not the ceiling. So 3,000 calories is the bottom floor, meaning no worker should consume less than 3,000 calories. However, we think that workers, we hope, can bargain for higher wages and get to higher figures, which will give workers a much more healthy and satisfactory life. Regarding the competition between countries, as I said earlier, it obviously is very difficult to cover many concepts in this one presentation. But as I said earlier, the Asia floor wage does not want to make countries less competitive by paying Asia floor wage. The countries can become less or more competitive depending on other things they may or may not do. But paying Asia floor wage in and of itself, we have done countries' competitive ranking, Bangladesh, Cambodia, India, Vietnam, they're all ranked differently. Then post-Asia floor wage, is that ranking changed? And we find that it's not changed. So what we mean to say is that Asia floor wage will not reduce or increase competition. It will keep it the same. Countries can choose to increase their competition through other means or decrease their competition through other means. But the accusation that is always leveled at trade union is that if you ask for wages, you will make us less competitive. We want to do away with that accusation, which is that you can pay Asia floor wage and still remain as competitive as you were before Asia floor wage. Regarding contracts between buyers and producers, these are extremely, in their world, confidential documents. We have not seen one that would be worth discussing here. However, we have made the recommendation because we are constantly looking at ways to implement Asia floor wage. One of the recommendations we have made is that labor costing could be ring-fenced, as Doug Miller says, and put in the contract, and that as local partners of Asia Floor Wage Alliance in the factory level, it will be our responsibility to make sure that that labor costing reaches workers and that that labor costing should not be misused. So we believe that this could be a part of a contractual element, but contracts are not shared with us. The other sort of, the other question of what can brands do with regard to this developing labor costing and pricing. Doing labor costing and pricing is a well understood scientific procedure with well-established technology which has been around for decades. Nothing has to be invented. It only has to be applied and used and the will to do it. So that is what brands can do, and we have approached brands to do it with us, but nobody has taken us up on it. It's very important to do. The larger issue of the dignity of how this low labor cost of 2.5 to 3% shows how labor is not valued is absolutely true. Most of the workers in garment industry tend to be women and also migrants. Women and migrants are probably one of the lowest valued workers in the world today. And it definitely shows not only a lack of value for Asian labor, but a lack of value for migrants and women. And in terms of asking brands for a favor, it's absolutely correct that this is, it is really amazing that one has to do this level of argumentation to establish something that is evident to many of us perhaps. But let me say this, that Asia floor wage to us is a definition and a figure to be used by trade unions, and we believe that just as code of conduct cannot be enforced by just writing a document on code of conduct, Asia floor wage cannot be enforced by simply doing another PowerPoint on the formula. It has to be implemented on the ground by workers having collective power to build unions, to monitor and report on their wages, and to make sure that they get Asia floor wage. So along with Asia floor wage, freedom of association and the right to collectively bargain are also very sacred principles. And most of the leadership in Asia floor wage are trade unionists.
Thanks very much also for the answer. I think that we have, for reason also of time, we have to listen to two important presentations. Thanks a lot for all what has been said. We shall certainly be back in case before the closure of the session.
I go, yeah? Thank you.